Hello, everybody. Welcome to 3 Point Perspective, the podcast about illustration, how to do it, how to make a living at it, and how to make an impact in the world with your art. I'm Lee White.
I'm Samantha Cotterill.
And I'm not Will Terry. I'm Anthony Wheeler. And all three of us are professional illustrators. And for the last 25 years, we worked with all of the major publishers and publications in the business. We published over 50 books and have taught illustration at universities and all over the place.
Each week, we tackle a subject related to illustration from 3 perspectives. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we argue, but every time you learn something brand spanking new.
Brand spanking new is right. All right. So
That's
we are
right.
going to dive in. We've got some questions. We have researched these questions.
No pattern, no
what about
warm up,
intro?
no hey guys, how have you been? It's been a little
I'm
bit.
normally not taking the lead, so I forget that that's
Okay.
what it does. So, hey, let me do my.
Let's just cut out the last 25 minutes of recording. Okay.
Hey guys, so what have you been working on?
Wait, is that your best Jake? Is that your best Jake impression?
Okay, I gotta think of like a young Jerry Seinfeld. That's sort of Jake.
I do like whenever somebody's not around, we do just completely bag on the other person. Like every time I've impersonated Lee, I've said, well, he's on assignment in Guatemala, helping young children learn how to draw. I talked about how one time he was in jail up in the mountains for a crime that he committed 15 years ago when his parents were in town. I have created an awful lot of lies
I love that.
about why people can't be on the
ask me
stream.
about that at some point, and I'll be like,
Wait, is Anthony being serious? What are you doing in Guatemala? How did you get that trip
Seinfeld
arranged?
impersonation. So what's the deal with illustrators and AI?
That was a terrible, terrible Seinfeld. The best
what are you
Seinfeld
guys
line like
working
that
on?
is the corn nuts one. Corn nuts? What's the deal with corn nuts? Is it a corn or is it a nut? Yeah, that's the best one.
So what have you guys been working on?
So
for
Sam
real?
and Lee, how have you guys
right.
been? We're at the end of summer into the spring of fall.
Yes, the time that actually work gets done. The spring and fall. Anyway,
Is that because all of us have kids that have gone back to school?
Yeah, I got one in college. The other one's almost there. So we're almost there. But I have to laugh because I saw the intro for the 25. I realized this morning that today is my 25th wedding anniversary. And
Wow.
That's awesome.
I noticed it at 1 a.m. when I was getting a text from the college kid, and I was like, wow, this date looks familiar. And then I woke up this morning and my husband comes down and he's like, yeah, did you realize today was an anniversary? And I was like, well, it better not be 25 because that would totally suck because we completely dropped the ball. And then we kind of factored, we're like, oh, it is 25. Well, there you go. That's what.
So what are you going to do for your 25th wedding?
Yeah, and what's the gift for 25?
I don't know. I just think it might be like, do we just watch one extra episode and skip the recap for like a binge session? I'm like,
Just
all
one
right,
more
we're going
Parks and
bold.
Rec.
Yeah, we're skipping recap again. I'm doing one more. No, but aside from that, I took my younger son to the Norman Rockwell Museum yesterday because I suck in that I realized we only live an hour away, and I've gone one time before, and I was like, why am I not taking advantage of this more often? And the Mad Magazine exhibit is up, and it was incredible. I mean, incredible. It was so wonderful to kind of go through the galleries and see all of these original ink drawings of like Spy versus Spy.
Yeah.
There were 3, I don't know if I pronounced them correctly, but Sergio Aragonés, Al
You did great.
Jaffe, and PC Vey. There were just like they're all their original ink drawings framed on the wall. And what it was so mind-blowing was just to see the scale of the work, how it was its originality versus in print form. And it was amazing to see mistakes and see the pencil work and see the whiteout, and it kind of made things more approachable in terms of, oh, these guys that the work is incredible, outstanding, but it really helps as a creator to actually see what the real original drawing looks like, aside from what you've seen as the printed form with it all cleaned up.
That's cool.
So that was incredible. And I grew up with Mad Magazine. My favorite thing was the folds in the back, the A to B fold. And so they had the original art for the folds, and they're huge. So if anybody has a chance to go there, you really need to go. It was really good. So that's
cool.
I tell you, man, when I finally went to see the Norman Rockwell Museum, I wasn't looking forward to it. Because
you said before you think he was a complete and utter hack and didn't deserve all the accolades. Right?
Not a hack. I knew he's good, but it's a little chintzy. It's a little. It's of course it's dated. And I don't know. I just wasn't really looking that forward to going to it, and then when we got there, I was so blown away with how good the quality is. And
oh my God, I agree with you.
Painter he is.
Absolutely. I felt the exact same way because exact same way. And then my younger son, who's in art school now, his reaction was he didn't expect it either. And he just, you find yourself blown away at the story, the narrative work that he does, how much he conveys with his composition and what he excludes and his facial expressions. And it was really good. Really good.
I think I'm going to start smoking a pipe.
Wait, is that going to be the secret, A, of your longevity and B, of your creativity?
At the end of the day, that's all that's left of you. I realize, to go into a studio, they still have the studio up and there's stuff, but there's the pipe right there. You're just like, all right. The thing. Of
all the things that we've talked about, that was the least expected one. Well, he did live to be 84 years old. So maybe you do have something going there. That would increase your longevity,
Exactly.
I was just looking, Al Jaffe is super inspirational to me from Mad Magazine. Yeah. He passed away at 102 years old. And he was drawing well towards the end. What a way to go.
I think there's a benefit to what we do as being interested in something.
Yeah.
Lasts your entire life. I do not ever see retiring. Maybe at some point I'm not making a living at it, but I will be drawing and painting forever. And I do think that there's something to that older people, when they retire, if you look at the data, their quality of life, if you don't have something to live for at that moment, it goes down drastically. So, So smoking and drawing is all I'm looking forward to.
Wait, are you also the Surgeon General? Just giving medical advice? What other medical advice can you provide?
That vapes, though. That's the modern pipe. It's just a vaping pipe.
I am not starting this conversation.
I think Sam was nervous that this would be a lethal triple today, and I think we're already there. I think we're already there.
Oh my God!
All right, so she told us what she's doing. What are you doing, Anthony? What's your big?
Yeah. The TLDR is all my kids finally went back to school. So it's a bit of a bummer because I love having the kids around, but it is really nice because we can get a lot of work done. I just got back from a Comic-Con, not as an exhibitor, but as a fan. I took my son to a little Comic-Con down south in Colorado Springs. And cool. My son Holden wants to be a voice actor, and he's super knowledgeable when it comes to acting and voice acting and animation. And as a dad, it's just so wonderful to watch your kid just flourish and find his tribe. And I tell you, he walked up to every celebrity and just, "Hi, I'm Holden."
Unbelievable.
And
that
just
is a skill set right there.
At a certain point, he's like, "Dad, come here. Let me introduce you." And I walked over and he was talking to this awesome guy, Christopher, who does a lot of the physical, practical work for Star Wars as droids and monsters and aliens. And then we started talking, and then I gave him a deck of the chaotic draw along prompt cards, and it's all because of Holden brokering this new relationship. I walked over at one point and he was hanging out with Ernie Hudson from the Ghostbusters and a billion other things. And I walk up and I was jokingly is my son bothering you? And then Ernie's wife was like, "Heavens, no, this kid is the best." And then they let us take photos, and Ernie's like, "Dad, jump in." And I'm like, "What's going on?" So
that's awesome.
So that was really great. And then the final part is we're working on getting our art book Kickstarter ready to be launched, I think, on Wednesday, September 18th. So it's a lot of work and a lot of mental hoops to jump through, but I think that's when we're locking it in. So
wow.
That's it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And
That's
so
really cool.
I had a gallery show that Anthony did not show up for.
Whoa. So again, here's my friendship with Lee. A day before this gallery show happens, I get a text message. Hey, idiot, can you show up at my gallery show? And I'm like, I'm in Colorado. I can't do it. I'm in Colorado Springs. I can't literally do anything. Had he given me more than 48 hours notice, this was 24 hours notice, mind you, I could have been like, yeah, I could have either made it or given him a good excuse.
At least you got invited.
Tough luck, Sam.
My S list, Anthony. Anyway, so I had the gallery opening. It was good. Here was my focus of the gallery. Normally, I get nervous in those situations. And then so because I do that, either I talk too much or I avoid people. That's my two go-to.
That's how I am.
But I decided to try to, whenever I meet somebody at this gallery show, if I don't know them, I'm just going to do the therapist thing where I just keep asking them questions. I just say, how does that make you feel? How was that for you? Just never turn the conversation on to me. And
how did that go?
I don't know. I talked about myself the whole time.
Oh my God.
Was that good for you?
No, I'm just kidding. It was amazing. I actually learned some things. I met this older lady, and she was interested in the work, and she started asking questions, but then I diverted it back to her. So you're interested in art? And she said, oh, I'm an artist. And I said, well, tell me a little bit more about that. And she said that when she was a teenager, she was interested in drawing and painting, and she entered a contest and won and got a scholarship to Pratt in New York City. I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. She's like, well, it would have been if I went. And I was like, well, how does that make you feel? And she said,
she's like, sadly, and then she starts crying and tells you that her entire life was horrible because she couldn't go.
She said that her dad, back then, she was probably, I don't know, 75. I'm just guessing at that age. But her dad, back then, you just don't become an artist. Like, not a lot of parents would be like, oh, great, you're going to go to art school. So he didn't let her go. And she became a nurse for the next 30 years or whatever. And then she's like, you know what? Screw this. I'm an artist. I'm going to go to art school. And so she went to art school and she became an artist.
Oh, wow.
And it was just kind of cool to hear that play out. And so I had a lot of these kind of conversations. I will tell you the one bummer, though, about the whole show. At the end of the night, there was this big cheese platter that was left over. And there was crackers and cheese and little pepperonis or whatever, salamis or whatever. And so I was kind of excited about this. I was like, is anybody going to take that? I'm trying to help clean up and stuff. Is anybody going to take that cheese platter? They're like, no, you can have it if you want to. So I boxed it up, or put the plastic lid on it. And I'm excited about it. I hadn't eaten all night. I'm kind of talking to people and stuff. And so I was hungry, and I was like, I'm going to eat this in my car. And so I'm driving home, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to eat from that cheese platter. And so I take off the lid, or I wanted to take off the lid. I reach over, and there's no cheese platter there. And I realized I left the cheese platter on top of my car. And so the cheese platter is now on the freeway. And so that was the worst thing that happened all night. I wanted my cheese platter.
How did you, in that moment, how did you really feel about that you couldn't eat that cheese?
I was sad. I was ultimately.
Why did it make you sad?
Heartbroken.
Well, why were you heartbroken?
Gotta have my cheese, bro. All right, enough about this stupid thing. Oh, I do have a watercolor workshop coming up just for those people who want to be a part of that. It is October 5th and 6th. Go to my website, Lee White Illustration. If you want to be a part of that, I have a few seats left open, and it is good. I'm doing such a deep dive into watercolor materials. I mean, I've already done a deep dive. I know enough about watercolor to probably teach the class, but I want to know everything. So I'm doing paper testing and pigment testing, all that kind of stuff, just a deep dive on all of it, and finding out some interesting stuff. So you'll find that out if you take the workshop with me.
Is this the workshop that I've been mandated that I have to be at?
Yeah, but you can't listen because you're not paying for the information. So you have to wear headphones. You don't get to learn anything. You just film. No, you probably already know all this stuff. You're a pro.
No. No, legitimately, like looking at the materials that you've been prepping for it and like communicating back to other people. I don't paint like that. I paint like not necessarily like paint by numbers, but I'm like an old school comic strip illustrator. Like for me, it's pencils, inks, then watercolor over top.
It's more like the line work is doing the heavy lifting, right?
It's doing 80%. And I've been able to scale that back more to like 50 or 60% and then have my work be much more textural over the last, handful of years. But the way that, because I paint wet on dry, where you typically will do wet on wet, build and build and build, lock in your values left and right, and all that sort of stuff. And you have to make really, really like bold decisions when you're painting and stuff like that. I can get away with a little bit more, but your technique is awesome. So I'm really looking forward to it, even though I can't listen.
Join me if you can. It'll be fun. All right. You guys ready to dive into some questions here?
Yeah, we were ready 2 hours ago.
Okay, here we go. Now, I tried to dive in, and then you said we need banter. So
I think, honestly, in the YouTube comments, if we didn't have the banter today, would this have been a good episode or not? Just answer that just simply. Yes or no? Good banter, bad banter.
Emoji to give too.
Cheese emoji.
I don't use emoji. Cheese emoji. There you go.
Absolutely perfect. Okay. First question is from Harshini. Can we use your name on the air? No. Is my business idea worth it?
So bad at this. How many episodes have you done?
Artist. No, they said we can use their name on the air. I'm a self-taught artist. I plan to use my art on products and sell them. To start with, just planning to buy a printer and some other small tools to sell stickers and calendars. I have a full-time job. I plan to start this as a side hustle and gradually make it full-time. I've heard Lee mentioning that there are other things to start, if not publishing books. So just want to hear your thoughts. Thanks for the podcast. Lee is my favorite podcaster. Okay. What do you guys think? I'll let you answer the question first.
Awesome. The question.
Sam, do you merchandise your characters and stuff like that outside of books?
No, so I would suck at answering this question today. Because the only experience I have for Remember are those keychains that cost me a lot of money. So you don't want to get my advice on merchandise.
It's a cautionary tale, that keychain story.
No, this isn't my wheelhouse, I'd have to say. That's not something I've ever really delved into. So that might be something where you guys
Can I get the short version of the keychain story? I don't know the keychain story.
So you didn't listen to my podcast?
I did, but my headphones failed.
Did you listen? Did you?
I was forced to. I was there.
So give me the short version. What is it?
The short version is that I'm impulsive and don't think things through. And then
ADHD.
Totally. Little bit of a red flag there. I was like, oh, these things are so cool. Deep dive into it to give away for the lookbook when I did the lookbook. And then I offered keychain giveaways. And then I didn't limit the giveaway to only the US. I didn't think this, and I didn't realize that a keychain thickness technically takes it out of the envelope realm and into the package realm. So one little keychain cost $40 to send to France and to Europe, which 80% of my entrants were from Europe. So that is the gist of it.
Shipping has ruined so many self-publishing projects.
Yeah, it's destroyed a lot of Kickstarter careers for sure.
Yeah. I'm giving them away, like throwing them at people that don't want them. So it's like
you're just at the grocery store chucking them at old ladies. Like, here, it's bags.
You should have said that it was a digital keychain and that they just misread it. Just go back and put it in all your pages.
You get a PDF of this keychain you can print out.
Oh my God.
And a hole punch to put your keys on. I like this question a lot because I think for me personally, this is where I was, 8-10 years ago. Just the grand idea, not only can you do illustration, but then can you market that stuff and get paid on it a second, third, fourth, fifth time? My biggest question that I think I would have for anybody, if you're kind of in the same spot as this person, is A, do you have an audience? B, do you have characters that tell stories? Do you have characters or images that people really truly care about? And then what kind of research have you done, not only on the sticker game, but the prints, the other merchandise and stuff? Do you understand what your margins are? Do you understand, like Sam was just saying, like where you can ship to and things like that? I think if a creator has a decent enough fan base with recognizable items or characters, I think merchandising in small ways like stickers and small prints and maybe even enamel pins, which have a little bit more of a headwind to it, I think that can be a really good spot. I will say is if you don't feel like you have enough of that kind of stuff, either an audience or those easily identifiable images, I think you have to go back to the drawing board and start to research what not your competitors, because we're not competing in the art space all that much, but what other people are doing and try to pull out some of those best practices. And the final wrap up to this is when I was at the Comic-Con over the weekend, there's a lot of people who are selling keychains, charms, stickers, pins.
There's a lot of that.
And these things are very small, and they don't necessarily show up super well in person. They might show up nice and well on an Instagram, but you have to have a really good story to get people to want to buy into these things and have a reason for people to truly want it. And I saw a lot of folks struggling to move that merchandise over the weekend. On the flip side, I have this awesome friend, Tony. He's awesome. He sells really incredible, huge stickers, and he's got a great pattern. He's got a great brand. He's traveled the earth selling this. Everybody knows him. Everybody loves him. And he's able to sell these stickers really, really, really easily. So
I have a quick agree and disagree a little bit there.
Nice.
Just from the perspective of having college kids. So let's say you don't have, and I think Jake may have brought that up before, if you're just starting out and you don't have a known connection to like a storyline or characters to maybe focus and start creating objects that maybe are under a general theme. I noticed with my son and a lot of college kids, they're always buying stickers to coat their water bottles or their laptops, and they're everywhere. I mean, it's a very almost oversaturated market.
Yeah.
But I know that for him, he's always like, he loves frogs. So he'll look for cool frog stickers, or so instead of trying too hard to create a specific character that maybe people don't have an association with or identify with, even just targeting a general genre that's maybe like mushrooms or things that tend to be sought out for decorating, like because dorm doors, dorm walls, stickers are used a lot at college. I mean, that's what I'm noticing, but that's just my thought.
Yeah, no argument. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think and I think you guys would back me up on this. I think there's also something to be said of like, you could overanalyze the heck out of all of this stuff and never do anything and listen to an idiot on the internet tell you, like, these are the 3 steps you have to do before you make stickers. But there's something to be said about just doing it and in learning on the fly and then just fine-tuning things like every couple of weeks or every couple of months, learning from your mistakes. I would just be cautious about the time spent. And as if you find that time being spent is like so valuable to you and you're loving it, and even if you don't sell a whole lot, like you're getting a ton out of that process, hell yeah, let's go. If you're strapped for time, just be cautious of the time invested before you think through some of those other things.
I know you have the website pulled up for there was like a screenshot, I think, where there was almost like a sticker sheet on this person.
I saw that, like the France kind of thing. Let me go down.
Right.
Yeah, Harshini has really lovely work, and I think that there's a lot of merchandisable type of stuff, especially if there's a lot of care and thought put into it.
Yeah. I mean, I think she's got a lot of wonders. I can't remember who this was. I'm so sorry, but there's a lot of great imagery that can be translated to product and stickers, I think, before focusing too much, trying too hard to create a character or things like that.
I agree. There's a couple things though. I think that if you're going to go that route, like your frog example is a great one. In that if you're going to go that route, basically you're going to have to start to design a little bit more. Right now, I would say this illustrator is more of a sort of a classic illustrator, like drawing a beagle, but it looks like a beagle, drawing a flower, but it looks like a flower.
Right.
And I think you got to go into that realm of high stylization where it's like, oh, I don't just want a sticker of any frog. I want this really cool looking frog that I haven't seen.
Oh,
and
yeah,
so
I agree.
A little more design aspect. I don't think they're totally ready yet, but the beauty is we haven't really talked about why I recommend people going into this space. And one of the reasons that I like it is that the cost of entry is so low. And so I wanted to point out, like, the question actually itself, thinking about going in, getting their own printer and doing stickers and catalogs. That's where my biggest disagreement is sort of with the question is, you don't want to buy a printer for this kind of stuff. The beauty of this low entry product kind of stuff is that you can get professionally made stuff so cheap. I mean, you can get 50 stickers for nothing.
Yeah, I love doing that with sticker. I mean, there's a lot of sticker companies that you could just, you don't need to invest in a printer at this point. And I definitely agree. I feel like she's at a point of practice and figuring things out and exploring. And I do think stickers are a perfect avenue for that, where the maybe less confident work, you can play and experiment more without a lot of risk.
Right.
But I definitely feel like
stickers, all those things have such low entry points. Anybody who's thinking about printing their own versions of those things, I love printing my own stuff. I've got a high-end printer that can print all kinds of stuff. I still don't print that stuff because they can do it so much better, so much faster. Even just cutting the cards and stickers and stuff out of the sticker paper, if you run it through, that's a nightmare. So don't take that on yourself. But so for advice for this person, figure out what your style is in terms of stylizing these things a little bit more if you're going to go into that realm, and then order your minimum, what we call minimum viable product. And if it's 25 stickers or some greeting cards or whatever, and then give them away. See what people's reaction is. Don't try to start selling them right from the get-go. The path to business and the path to success is figure out what works and then slowly monetize it. You will not make money right in the beginning, and that's what should happen because you're trying to figure out what people want. Will they pay for it? How much will they pay for it? And do you need to change your product? And so you go through a year of that, then you start saying, okay, this one's $1, this one's $2 or whatever, and ramp up.
Yeah. Great advice.
Boom.
Awesome. Maybe you do know something.
I'll tell you guys this. I have a little confession. You're asking if I heard the other podcast. I've never listened to one of our podcasts ever. Not one.
Are you serious?
Yeah,
really?
Not a single one. Matter of fact, sometimes when I plug in my phone, it will automatically go to a 3-point, like a podcast that, is on my phone or whatever. And it'll be like, hey, I'm Jake Parker. This is 3-Point Perspective. I'm like, turn it off.
Skip.
I just listen to myself and go to sleep.
Does that help?
All right. The next question. Will McNeil, can we use your name on air? No. I want to be a gallery artist, but don't know what my brand is. I know you guys' expertise is in illustration, and I know Lee's experience with things like art fairs. I want to be a fine artist, but don't want to have a brand necessarily, and feel like the look of my work can be a little all over the place. I can't settle on a style with my art because it can feel limiting, and it's fun to explore different styles. But I know you want to get a following as an artist in any field. It's important to create a brand for yourself. That's absolutely true. So people can identify your work and know what kind of work they can expect from you. How can I develop a brand that allows me to experiment with all sorts of mediums? Side note, I've been off social media for several months now, and I've been struggling with finding paths to get my art noticed without constantly promoting myself on social media. Any thoughts to this? I'm going to pull up their work and we can share it. That's a tough question, though. So I will say that it's a tricky spot to be in. The natural tendency of what they're saying is accurate, or the general stream of what they're saying is you do have a brand. And if your art is all over the place, it will be impossible to get traction in any field. It doesn't mean that you don't play and that you don't experiment. But what it means is you need to decide what your A thing is and what your B thing is going to be. Now, that could look like my A thing is I'm going to paint images of boxers, say, for example, and you have a whole show about boxers. Your B thing is I'm experimenting, drawing these spiders and other weird stuff. That we're showing some of this stuff on the YouTube visuals, if you want to go there and see sort of what this work looks like. It's not as all over the place as you might think, and that's where I'm going to go next. But anyway, my point first off is settle on what you're doing, and then have and then play in the background, and pretty soon what you're doing in the background gets elevated to the A game. What was your A game, you've moved past now, and then there's a new B, and you start to work on that, and that's how you start sort of evolve in a sort of falling forward kind of way, in my opinion. But gallery, a lot of people think, oh, I want to be a gallery artist because I can do anything I want. And that is not true. You have to have a theme to the show, 99 times out of 100. There's always an exception. And, so I don't want to say it's always that way. But like I just had my gallery show last week. I've got all these original landscape or cityscape paintings I've been doing, traditional watercolor, that I would have loved to have shown in the gallery. But if you go to my gallery show, I've got 30 paintings up, and they are all from the exact same project. That is how you create a cohesive show. And that's how people start to sort of know your brand. It doesn't mean you can't change your brand, but if you're going to get work as an illustrator, some art directors need to know what they can expect from you. And if you do a gallery show, patrons and galleries need to know what they can expect from you. If you just show up with anything, it will throw them off considerably. So there is some branding, but don't feel like you shouldn't be experimenting. I'm always experimenting. It's just my B game. You guys might not even see half of what I experiment with. I do, a lot of people don't know, I do like a lot of traditional figure drawing and painting. That's realistic. And I don't show anyone that stuff because I don't need to. It's not part of my brand. I just enjoy it. So that's my sort of take on things. What do you think, Anthony? Oh, wait. No,
I'm a happy participant. I'm going to defer back to Sam.
I can't see since I'm sharing the screen, I can't see. Oh, wait, there's your beautiful faces. Okay, so what do you guys think?
I disagree. Boom, boom, boom.
Gloves on.
I think you can have several A games going on simultaneously as long as each is an A game, so to speak. Like, I think each medium or genre that you're doing has to be super confident and really well done. I don't think you can present one area that's very well done and then a few subpar areas that still need work. I think those need to get put aside and figured out to the point where they are very confident that you can present them. But I have no problem with a varying, so to speak, grouping of work, because there is no doubt there's going to be something that connects all of them, whether you realize it or not. And for me, it's color palette. My color palette tends to be very limited, and that will cross over no matter what medium I'm doing. If I'm doing sculpture, if I'm doing 2D, or that element is a constant thread throughout of it. So in a way that connects everything, but having the different areas, but to a place of confidence, opens up more opportunities for jobs for me, where let's say I have a client that's interested in a certain project that they will say, well, this element of your work, I'm not sure fits with us perfectly, but this other area that you work in, I think would be great for this job. But because I do it to a level of it's at its place of A level place, they are going to be confident in that I'm going to be able to give them what they want. And I might be opening up myself to more job opportunities.
Well, that was sort of my second, where I was going to go with that, is most people, when they think the work is different, it's not actually that different.
Yeah, I don't think yourself notice it. Yeah. Like, I think often, right. Yeah, if someone else looks at your work.
I would do books that would be like the first book I did was in oil, first two. And the next one I did in acrylic. The next one I did in doll paint, like paint they used to paint dolls.
Yeah.
And then watercolor after that. And each one, I was like, oh my God, my client is going to freak out when they see this. And it looked exactly like the rest of it.
Yeah. You know and how often do we talk with our illustrator friends that will say, oh, you can't tell, this doesn't look like anything like my work. And they're always like, yeah, I can tell, it's a total Sam. I don't see it. But so there's clearly innately something in there that is getting picked up that I might not necessarily recognize. I think my main issue is, my worry is when I've gone to colleges or universities to kind of mentor or talk with other college art students, there is such a worry and stress over finding their style that they're not allowing the time needed to just explore work, appreciate work, copy work, figure out how artists that they admire work on a certain technique, bring that into their own work. And I think style is a combination of the materials you use, the subject matter, and then the voice comes into play, which is what makes it more unique to you with your life experiences, your hopes, your dreams, your fears. Those things all together create something that's uniquely your own. But for this person, they've got such a lot of established work. And let's say art fairs are of interest. I don't know about you, Lee, but what I noticed is I had certain art fairs, I knew my demographic for what would sell more at that particular place. Like for Cherry Creek, I would focus on my large oil paintings or my ceramics that were on the higher end. That seemed to be the market for the clientele that would go to Cherry Creek. When I went to Des Moines, I had people would have a certain price range and they were more interested in prints and drawings. And I noticed like, okay, I'm going to focus my booth at this location on more of my, let's say he does his architectural drawings at this one. But it's something that you only come to through experiencing it and trying out these art fairs. And if you want to try a variety of work in your art fair, as long as everything is at its quality level, and maybe the booth design itself is what kind of pulls everything together and creates almost this gallery-like appearance. But
I still disagree with that. But the one thing that I think you're not considering there is the artist level. I think if you are a pro and you've been doing it for a long time, you really can identify in a very nuanced way how things tie together. And they do tie together at the higher end. Once you have been doing it forever, I mean, whatever I paint is sort of going to be part of my world because I've been doing it for so long, and you're the same way. I think when students do something like that, it does actually look entirely different.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes. And I agree. I think you have to get to that place where each thing is at an A place. And until that happens,
right.
I think that's why I was saying kind of showcase the A stuff and then allow the other things to grow and percolate and master them.
So we don't agree actually. Yeah. So
yeah. But then there's a place where I do think you can have a few A's at the same time.
Right. That's true. I'm glad you added that on there because that is absolutely true. I think it changes as you go through your career. But like if you're a graduating student and you have concept art in half your portfolio and then figure drawings in the other half of your portfolio, that is not going to work.
Sure.
Anthony, what's your take on this?
For once, I really just like sitting back and listening to this because I don't have any experience in that world. So I think it's really fun just to listen and all of that. What I'm interested from you guys though too. So the second part of that question says, side note, I've been off social media for several months. My accounts, yada, yada. I've been struggling to find paths to get my art noticed without constantly promoting myself on social media. When I was at that little Comic-Con over the weekend, I didn't go back and like look at other people's, like those exhibitors' social media accounts. I was just sort of living in that moment and just happy to be there and happy to experience and things like that. And so I think there are still venues and ways that you don't have to have this like massive online presence that sucks your soul straight out of your chest. I will say though, to find community, you will have to be very smart about how you find community and how you find customers and how you get your outward presence out there. Like, I'm curious, like, what would you guys do if you didn't have like your social media stuff, you didn't have access to this podcast? Like, what would you do for your fine art paintings to like find an audience? Like, how would you go about that in 2023 or 4 or wherever we're at right now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know in terms of art fairs because I think Lee's more present with that because my art fair experience is from years ago, but I still would like to think that that's getting into the art fair would be my main goal. And then the people that come and buy your work are going to want to stay connected with you, whether it's signing up for a newsletter or doing something. And oftentimes you get repeat I was always getting like once someone purchased something, they tended to become a collector most of the time.
That's true.
So 80% of my clients at that time were repeat collectors. And once they bought something, they kind of wanted to continue the journey and they wanted to stay connected. And I did a newsletter back then, and I still have a really big following newsletter that's still carrying people from back then. And so I did say it's more just proactive, getting yourself out there into these spaces where you're physically showing your work and you're entering art shows or you're doing art fairs. That could go a long way, I think.
And you're going to have to, if you're not using social media, you're going to have to do something, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You have to find other ways. There are ways. I mean, if you really want it, you can figure it out. There are ways.
If I was that person, my question would be, why are you off social media? And if the reason is, because I can't focus, like everybody sort of wants to be less on social media for the most part that I talk to. If it's like, I can't be online, it just takes too much of my time or attention, I would say sign up for, there's a whole host of ways to auto post for you. I don't know why somebody would be trying to build a brand and then be off of the areas where the most people are. My big phrase that I've been saying over the past 2 years, especially with Self-Publishing Pro class that we're running, that's coming up very soon actually, is that it's not hard to make art. It's not hard to make products. It's hard to sell it. That's the hardest thing about it, in my opinion. It's not the making of the art or the product. It's how do you reach the people who are going to be potential audience for it. So I would just suggest don't cut yourself off from that, and figure out what the problems are. If it is some kind of social media taking too much attention, post in other ways. Get somebody to post for you, or use the software that does it for you. Like, what are some of the ones that do that for you?
We do almost all of it manually here. But to that point though, I know I'm stealing it back though, but with our chaotic draw along socials, there's some of the channels that we know we're not going to have a great following and stuff like that. Twitter is probably, or X or whatever is the main one. But I constantly just remind the team, and they totally get it, is sometimes you have to be present as the cost of doing business to show that there's credibility. Like if you really want to build a brand, sometimes you have to sort of like just put posts out there to exist in the ether. So if somebody wants to check and see, is this really a thing? Is this like a true brand, a true company, a true product? They can go and they can see all of that material posted. And sometimes it's less for us about finding followers and finding the market on some of these platforms. And it's just more so so people absolutely know we exist and that we're not some fake AI generated BS and stuff like that.
That's a good point. If somebody goes to your Instagram, for example, and you've got posts for all the way back to 2017 or whatever.
Yeah, and that's it.
It lends a certain amount of credibility that you're not just all of a sudden popped up 3 months ago and using AI and just scamming people. I mean, there's a certain amount of legitimacy with having a website that has a physical address or a phone number people can call. And so I agree with that.
Or if you haven't posted since 2017, but you're still marketing from it. I think people start to get really nervous about that, and I think they should.
But keep experimenting. I mean, ultimately, do not ever stop experimenting, going back to the first part of that question. And that's another stuff that's things that are fun to put out there with, blogs are sort of making a comeback and quick stories on Instagram. Those are great little things. Hey, I just did this little doodle. Here it is. It doesn't have to be this big thing,
Yeah. And I had gotten to a place where I was able to kind of back off from Instagram, and social media, but that's just because what I needed. But I had enough. My following, my buyers weren't all there. My following on Instagram was probably more so other artists and things like that. So it wasn't until I established a good following newsletter, and then from people that's where I will, when I have something to share, I will post a newsletter or things like that. But then my response is pretty big versus social media, and then just the saturation of it. But it's just you figure out what works for you. But
I agree about the newsletter. Do you still do a newsletter?
When I remember to, yes. But yeah, no, I mean, I do when something is, I just share a newsletter when I have something to share. It just depends on the
Jake
work.
is really good about it. I'm spotty about it.
Yeah, I am too. I'm spotty.
I'm just trying to figure out, I've been very interested in tapping into the Patreon, but that's where I'm torn because I can't. I'm all over the place too because I was like, well, I don't know whether I would want to talk about all different things. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure stuff out.
Patreon is a weak platform. I'm just going to go ahead and throw it out there. I have my patrons and I love them dearly, but I'm going to take them somewhere else. The platform itself sucks.
Good to know. I mean, I agree with you. I don't know much.
The thing is about Patreon is it has the brand name. So the CEO has been very front of camera, and so they have gotten better and then worse and then better in some ways. But the thing is the tools that are there and the community is there. Like people just don't spend a lot of time on Patreon, at least the people that in my circle, just consuming and enjoying and things like
that. There's not interaction.
No.
Yeah.
Like you can if there's no search function easily at all. Like if you really want to be like, you want to find watercolor illustrators, good luck. You have to have somebody's name to know where their page is. Like bring them over to like a paid Discord where you can have enormous conversation, or bring them over to like a Ko-fi where it's similar to Patreon, but there's some really great integrated tools like for merchandise and for sharing video and stuff like that. Patreon just, if they can somehow crack the code to get people to have conversation inside of it and then make searching way, way, way easier, it would be a lot better.
Agreed.
But it's also been 10 years and I don't think that's going to happen. So today's episode is sponsored by Patreon, where you too cannot have a community that pays you money.
All right. When do you want to read the last question? I don't want to read them all.
Sam's going to make me read this. I guarantee it.
Yeah, you're reading this one.
All right. The next question comes from our friend Robert. Robert, thanks for letting us share your name. The subject says, mind your own business. Sam. Hey guys, love the podcast. That was just generated to Sam and I, by the way, not you, Lee. Get wrecked. Kind of have a general question and not one so much geared towards children's illustration, but really need some insight here. Is it our place as a contractor to say something to a client if we feel like they are getting bad business advice from external forces, family, friends, etc.? As a contractor, how much should I know about their business? Although the work is still within the agreed upon scope, just making other decisions, sometimes other decisions just don't align with the original vision from that scope when I was brought on, and it may jeopardize the future of their business and possibly my payment. So Sam and I talked about this one a whole bunch before Lee got here today. And we were trying to think through like, what are these possible scenarios and like, how could we tie this back and, getting kind of stuck in that word contractor, like what does that mean in terms of the relationship? And I think what we were postulating is like, could a scenario similar to this be an independent book team? So you have an independent writer who's contracted with an independent illustrator to put a project together. And whoever's paying the bill, in this case, we're just going to say the writer, potentially is having all these external forces, their husband, their wife, their CPA, their dog, their ghost, and giving them advice that might not align with truly where this project needs to go and how that conflict and that rub truly happens. Like what would you do in a situation where you have an agreed upon scope on a project, but then scope creeps in and you are in jeopardy a little bit and you know that there's some bad decisions happening. Like, what do you do?
There's a couple of, man, it's so hard to not know the specifics of this one.
I know, right? If we knew the specific, we would be able to dive.
Very tough.
I'm postulating a lot here. Also using the term postulating.
Yeah, I bet there's a cheese.
Your word of the day on your little calendar.
It's a big calendar. It's a big one, not a little one.
I think there's two things here. One is it's if you're talking about the scope of what the illustrator is actually doing.
Yeah. That
is a separate issue than if you're concerned that your client or the person you're working with is getting bad business advice that doesn't affect the scope of what you're doing. So you need to figure out that question first, because if it's option A there and it is affecting your business, that conversation needs to happen ASAP. And the way to have that conversation is easy. You say, first off, if now the job has changed in some aspect, you say, let's go ahead and take care of the invoice from the first part of the job where it was this other thing. And I'd be happy to discuss the terms for where this project is going if this project has changed. That's the easiest way to have that. Don't try to just add a bunch of stuff to one invoice. It never gets paid and it gets really, really confusing. So you basically cash out of that first one, establish the new contract for the new scope of work. The way to test yourself is did you do the amount of drawings you're supposed to, and was the subject matter the same? So don't mistake it for a revision request. Like, in other words, if you're doing a knight in shining armor, if they're changing the armor, that's a revision request. If they're changing that knight to a magic frog, that's a different job. And so it's a different scope and it's a different contract. So lock that down. That's an easier one, an easier conversation to have than the second one where you got a wife, a mom, whoever else involved that is now changing sort of where their direction is going, and you're just concerned about them.
Yeah.
That's a good answer.
I think if you're involved in business with other people, you have to be able to have really thoughtful conversations with these people. And I think it's every situation is different, but I would not personally enter into a business relationship or agreement without some sort of ability to be able to have an open dialogue and to share what I'm nervous about or to make suggestions on things. And if I'm in one of those relationships and maybe it feels like you have that at first and it turns sideways, you have to really reevaluate that relationship. There's so many horror stories, particularly like in the independent children's book game with an independent artist and an independent writer, and they just can't get it together and they work on a thing for 2 years and it turns out to be a disaster. Everyone hates each other at the end. No one gets paid. There's no money to be made because the book stinks. And these are things that you can establish much more at the beginning of a relationship. And then if you're smart about it, you can have those conversations along the way. There's also, and I'm curious what you guys think, there's also no shame to say, look, this isn't it. I have to go. I cannot do this anymore. And save yourself the time and pressure.
Even with, I don't have that experience for when I was creating picture books because everything I've done has been through trade publishing. So I haven't had that experience. But in a way, it kind of reminds me of when I was doing art fairs and painting and I would get commissions, which was very common to get a commission, but I would have a contract that they would have to sign, that they'd put 50% deposit down, and it's a non-refundable deposit because a lot of times, basically they would be wanting me to create something, a painting for their home, but then the requests would start coming that would be changing what was originally planned, or can we change this color, or this doesn't work with, and it's like at that point, this is where we break off because you're buying the work from me because it's a Samantha Cotterill piece, but I'm not like a made to order painter. Right. Like I'm not, but so that's where I had to protect myself and put a contract that they had to sign that was a non-refundable that I could then break away if it was becoming.
Have you actually had to do that?
I've had to do that probably 2 or 3 times. Most often it didn't happen, but in a way, as hard as it was probably for the best because if I tried to stick with that, it would be a never ending, can you change this? This isn't, because that before I did do that contract, I had some horrible experiences where in the end I lost money because the amount of time and back and forth and changing it and adjusting it, it became such a huge, overwhelming project that it was no longer mine. And I lost money on it and I had to protect myself that way. But there has to be some definitions that you have to agree upon.
Have you ever done that, Anthony? You had to bail on a client?
So yeah, with being very cautious about the names and everything like that. Yeah. So I had a really fun opportunity a handful of years ago to work on an independent children's book project with a subject matter that I really liked, with an author that I really liked. An upfront advance, a $10,000 advance with profit sharing on the back end. It was a really good situation for an independent project. You don't typically get that kind of stuff.
Wow.
There was just enough, and this is of no fault of anybody else. There was just enough influence outside of that relationship that I was carrying back and forth with that author that it just wasn't working. And there was a lot of like, there's just a lot of stress, and there was a lot of like back and forth, and there was just things that couldn't be agreed upon. Again, not with the author, but with the staff and the team and things around. And ultimately, I just had to walk away from it. I could have suffered for the next, and suffered meaning had a great experience with the author, but then suffered through, some of the technical stuff that just wasn't going to work for my personality. And that stunk. I didn't necessarily want to do that. It would have been a great gig and everything, but I just ultimately knew it wasn't going to work. And so I walked away. Yeah. And that would have been
nothing. I always feel great when I walk away, because it's not going to get better. And if anything, it's going to get worse. Like Sam was saying. So like,
if you have a bad feeling, man,
you're
never going to get rid of that ick, right? That icky feeling. And even if it's like a 2% ick, I think had I been a little bit more nuanced, and I think had I been probably better at my scope, and been where I'm at today, I think most of that would have gotten removed. And I think we could have gotten through it. I might still have a couple of those little red flags, but I don't know. Who knows? No regrets. No, except for being on this podcast with Lee today.
I'll tell you this. The last time I ended up firing a client on a job, I was doing these little icons. I was illustrating these little icons for a magazine, and they had a print version and an online version, and it was going to go all over the place. So there was like 5 or 6 little icons, and they were just going over these things with a fine-tooth comb. I mean, it was in the print magazine, it wasn't even a 1/4 inch high. Like, it was like a tiny little thing. But they were like workshopping it and showing it around the office, and then they give notes, and I'd make those changes. And I went through a couple of round of changes, and then they came back and said, okay, let's just think about where we're going with these things, which to me sounded like, let's go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, let's start over.
And I was like, and they're like, let's start. And I was like, you know what? You're in luck, because I've uploaded the files to your Dropbox, and you can do whatever you want to with them from now on. And that's how I let them go. And they were like, super furious that I, cut the tie. But I was so happy the rest of that day that I wasn't working on that stupid job. So you got to go.
Because there's more clients out there too. Like, I think sometimes we're just so excited to get the job, right? And then like somebody wants to work with us, but there's a lot more people out there who would want to work with you. And so cutting ties can't be that bad,
I've learned something, by the way, if anybody wants some advice on getting out of that situation in a better way than I did, because that makes for awkwardness, and they can also talk to other clients that you're difficult to work with, and so you sort of don't want that. If I was going to do that same situation again, how I would handle it is this. I've already gone through the changes that we talked about. Let's go ahead and settle on this invoice, kind of like my advice before. Let's settle this invoice, and then my change rate is $150 an hour or whatever it's going to be. And you'd be surprised how happy they are with what they have once you.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea.
Because
versus my tap out.
All right, so I've got a segment you guys don't even know about for this show.
Oh,
what? Really?
Yep. Should I do a theme song?
Yes.
Yeah, do themes. Yeah.
Okay. I got to think of what it is first. Normally I just start singing and I come up with it by the end. So here we go. The stories that we tell, because sometimes you fall and you break your back. Okay, so here's how the story goes. This is a little segment I call the stories that we tell. So there's always, you go to a dinner party, you go to a regular party.
Always.
It could be any kind of party with people that you don't know. And there's a few consistent stories that you'll end up telling more than others throughout your life, right? The ones that stick. There's like probably, a handful of them where something weird, it's so specific to you that you sort of end up telling it. So I asked Jake and Will this question last week, and it was pretty funny to hear the answers to, and interesting actually, that Will got hit by cars twice. That was his story. He's been hit 2 times by cars. Anyway, so I want to ask you guys, what is one of those stories that you end up telling in a quick way, 5 minutes or so, or less? Do you want me to go first and you can think about it?
Go for it, because you just, unfortunately, this is really exciting, but you muted for the last minute, so I have no idea what you just said.
Did you not hear him sing?
I heard singing and then it stopped. And so now you're like, go. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing.
I'll just recap real quick. These are the stories that you tell at a dinner party, or like just something that's happened to you. There's a few stories you tell in your entire life, right? Over and over, that's sort of specific to you. And so
okay.
I have such a terrible.
I've got one.
Okay, so I'll go first. Anthony, you think of this and you can get on board. So,
and it doesn't have to be art related. It can just be what you tell.
No, just in your whole life. Just it ends up happening to you. So this one is a wild one. I don't even know if Anthony knows this one yet. But I was a photographer for a brief period of time, and I was doing a photo shoot in Atlanta, Georgia, for a magazine out of New York, and I had all these models at the studio. And I'm walking back in this building, and it has one of those doors that locks automatically, right? And so I'm coming in with all these models, and I'm the first one in because I have the key. And I'm in the hallway, and all the other people are starting to come in. I have an assistant and everything, and there's a freight elevator. And so I open the door on the freight elevator. It has two doors, like the one opens vertically and the other one opens horizontally, or whatever. There's two kind of doors that. The first one doesn't open if the second one is closed. So I open the door and I turn to make sure everybody is in the hallway and the door hasn't locked anybody out. And I step into the elevator shaft and there is no elevator there. Oh my God, that's my worst fear. And broke my spine in half.
Wait, what?
This serious?
Yeah. And so I landed on my heels first, like a cat. Is what I like to think.
How are you not incredibly rich from this?
So I'll get to that in a second. But so I hit my heels. So both of my heels broke first. And then I landed on my butt, and it broke my butt and my back at the same time. So I'm just laying there, and I didn't know what happened because when you step into an elevator shaft, there is no light. It is pitch black.
Oh my gosh. I have such a phobia of elevators.
I thought to myself, like, did I pass out? Maybe I passed out because there, you know how like in moments where there's adrenaline, like you can process quite a few thoughts in a really short amount of time. Anyway, I was like, oh, wait, did I pass out? And then I was like, oh, I stepped in the elevator shaft. And right when I thought that, I hit. And I saw this like almost flash of purple. And I don't know if that was from my camera or if that was like, getting hit really hard. But anyway, so I'm looking up and all these models now are looking into the elevator shaft. The most surreal kind of experience. So they called 911 and the fire department had to break. There's no way to get me out of the elevator shaft. So they broke through the level that I was on, which was on the ground floor.
Dude, my mind is blown right now. Can you recreate the sound that you made when these gorgeous models were looking down at you? What sound were you making?
I was going, I'm okay. I'm good. I'm good.
I kind of wish I went first because this story just
for about a year, I guess, of rehab. But I remember when they were taking me to the hospital, I had no health insurance. Talking about health insurance in the United States.
Oh my God.
But they asked me if I had health insurance, so they took me to the really nice hospital. And then when they got there, they found out I did not have any insurance, and they put me back in an ambulance and took me to the downtown Atlanta hospital, Grady. And when I was there, waiting, I probably waited like 6 hours to see somebody, and a lot of the people in the lobby with me were handcuffed to their gurney. I remember that.
That's so funny. So
when was this?
I was 22.
Oh my God.
So a while back, I made a 100% recovery. I still snowboard and mountain bike and
I have such a phobia of elevators. I always have the same dream that I like fall and become paralyzed and people are like thinking I'm dead and I'm like inside. My voice is going, I'm alive, please.
Well, what's interesting about that is that, since then, there's been a lot of, I've done research on falls and because I kind of go back to that every now and again. And apparently, if you fall more than 10 feet, the chances of some kind of paralysis goes up drastically. And because I landed like perfectly flat, it just compressed and crushed my spine, but it didn't shear.
Is that why you're so short? Like, were you taller then? And like you've been compressed?
Yeah. I used to be 6'5".
What would you have done if my version of my story was like, this one time I was in Atlanta with my friends and I got a little rowdy and then I broke a hip and then I was handcuffed to a chair and there's this guy who came into the hospital just screaming, ah!
Well, that's why I'm bringing this up. I was like, I thought it was you over there in the corner crying. About your hip.
Wow.
Anyway, that's my story.
That's your dinner party story. Wow. Now I don't want to go. I don't have anything. Like, that's kind of, I wish I had gone first.
Jake's last week, to temper that back, Jake's last week was the time he decided to cuss more. Oh my God. It can be anything between an elder shaft and cussing.
Oh my God. Mine is, well, so that trumps everything. How do you follow that? Oh my God. Now I'm going to be really, oh my gosh. I don't even know.
Do you need a second, Sam?
Wow. All right. So I'll go to my story, but it really sucks compared to this one now. There's nothing to it. I should have gone first. And I'm only saying because it's just what comes to my mind because you just said go. It's not an elevator story, but basically when I was at UW-Madison, that's where I went to college first. And I would go to it was during finals week. And my husband's so sick of the story because I tell it all the time, but I don't know. It's not that interesting now that I've heard this one. But anyway, so it was finals week and we're in the computer lab because, we don't have laptops yet. It's 1992, 93. So we're in the computer lab and I'm at my computer and it's basically a day before the university shuts down. And all of a sudden my screen freezes and I was like, oh, something's wrong. I can't really work on my paper. I don't know what to do. A computer novice. And I was like, oh, look under the desk. And I look under the desk and there's like a power strip kind of thing. I'm like, oh, well, maybe I'll just like turn this off and on. Yeah. Oh, no. So I turn it off and on to reboot the computer. And then all of a sudden I hear this one guy jump up. My paper, it's gone. And then I hear another person goes, all our research, it's due in 2 hours. Where did it go? And then in that moment, I'm like, there's no way I can admit that I just did this. And so I stood up and I went, my paper, what happened? My paper. And I was like, it's gone. And then I'm like, I go to the desk and I just go, I don't know what happened. My paper, I just lost everything. And then they're like, oh, did somebody turn it off? I was like, well, I have no idea. I was just working on my paper. And then I hightailed it out of there as fast as I could. I destroyed some lives. I'm sure I destroyed some lives. And I am just going to say now, if there's anyone 1993 at UW-Madison
did you fess up to anyone? Did you tell anybody?
Probably at a dinner party.
No, I mean, did you tell anybody there? Like, it was me, like nobody knew?
Nobody knew because I was so anxious and so freaked out and panicked that
that is so good.
So that's my story.
That's a great story. That's
a really good story.
Is it?
That's a really good.
Is it? Because there's somebody crying in there.
Let us know in the comments if you were in the room with Sam.
If you were in the library.
What emoji are they going to do?
Yeah,
Fall of 23 at UW-Madison in the computer lab of.
So you'd have to use the computer emoji and like the broken heart emoji.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Anthony, what's your story?
So I hate you, Lee. I've told a couple of really traumatic, strange stories on this podcast. I'm not going to recount one that I've already done, but I told a story a few months here where I had gone, the TLDRs, I had gone to a baseball game with my work, had one adult beverage at like 4:00 in the afternoon, hung out at the baseball game for the entirety of the day. The night we ate dinner there. I didn't really drink. It wasn't a really big deal. And then I got, as I was leaving, maybe at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, I got caught in a DUI, like checkpoint. And I was just in the checkpoint, like just eating Junior Mints because I had bought a whole bunch earlier that day and that they were on sale and they were delicious. So why wouldn't I? Turns out that they didn't believe my cover story. And they disagreed. They thought I was trying to mask my breath. I had not been. I had one beverage at 4:00, and this was 7 hours later. They pulled me out. They read me my rights. I had to do all of the tests. I was super nervous. I freaked out. I didn't know what to do. I'd never been in trouble in my entire life. I've never been arrested. I don't have a speeding ticket since I was like 16 years old. And for 3 hours, they put me through the barrage of tests. Ultimately, blew a 0.0 multiple times. They had to let me go. And the police chief was like, why do you think you failed all the tests? And I said, I was just really nervous. And I started crying. I had just had Holden. So this was 15 years ago. And I thought my life was going to be inexplicably
Why don't you
ruined.
start with the breathalyzer?
I offered. I was like, look, I've not been drinking. Just give me a breathalyzer. Like they put me in handcuffs and like read me my rights and everything like that. So that was the story I told them.
Oh my God.
I freaked out. I thought I was going to jail. And there was a guy next to me just screaming obscenities, calling the cops pigs and all sorts of stuff. And he's like, yeah, right. And I'm like, no, not right. I was so terrified. I didn't get home until like 1:30 in the morning. And
did they have you try to do the alphabet backwards? Because that's my biggest fear ever.
But I don't remember if I had to do that one, but I had to stand on one foot, and I was on Spear Boulevard, which is a bridge, and there's wind whipping back and forth, and I couldn't stand straight because there's so much wind. Like I tell you, the calamity of errors on this thing was incredible. And ultimately they all apologized. We shook hands and walked away, and they thought I was on drugs for a while, which I have never done. So it was a joyous occasion. That's the story I've already told. The other story, this is for after the dinner, after the dessert, after the coffee and everything. One time, and this is how we're going to end the podcast, is my father had, this is later in my adult life, my father had called and said, hey, I've got a great present for you. This is a little gross, by the way, but just go with it. I have a great present for you for when you get home for Christmas. And I was looking forward to it. Maybe, I can't remember. I was married at the time. I don't know if we had a child yet, but we were poor. And I was thinking my dad was going to give me the keys to a Porsche or something. Like he had cashed out his 401k. Something great was going to happen. And he had been hyping this up for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And so we finally get home, give the hugs. My dad is so excited to give me this gift. And he had also told me that recently he had some medical tests done and that everything was okay. And I was like, okay, that sounds good, Dad. So he gives me this little ring box, and I pop open the box and I pull this little thing out. I unwrap it very delicately. I'm staring at him. I'm wondering what my big Christmas gift is going to be. And I put it here, and on the front it says, "My colonoscopy, a flip book. Love, your father." And my father had created a flip book of all of the photos of his colonoscopy from inside of his colonoscopy. And I flip this open and I'm just wanting to vomit, right? And that was my gift from my father that Christmas.
Wow.
He was a moral degenerate and a complete weirdo. And I have told that story just in terms of like how to never get excited for anything, because you might get a flip book of my father's colonoscopy.
What did you feign excitement when you got the gift? What'd you say?
I can't swear on this podcast. I don't want to, Jake's delicate swearing senses. I can't do that. But I was like, why would you do this? Like, why? This is embarrassing. Like, again, this is not great.
Wow.
We've laughed about it for years and years and years, but yeah, I can't tell that one like while we're like, putting stew in our mouth,
Right.
So
that's pretty good.
Wow.
That's my story.
Those are good.
All right.
You guys,
I think your story breaking your back.
Do
is
we
better,
need
though.
we need an emoji for that last little story?
No, we don't.
I'm scared of what that would be.
I don't use a lot of like fart and poop humor in my personal life, so no, we don't.
I'll just tell a story that's all about that at the end.
I know, it's a good story. He put me on the spot. I've not had lunch.
Yeah, it's not how I am, but I'm just going to showcase the story. But I don't like to talk about it.
I have nothing else.
We need to have Anthony do a one of those drunk tests on every episode.
Imagine like that's the thing that I need to hang out with you guys.
Can you get up and stand on one foot and look up?
No.
And recite the alphabet backwards.
Well, I'm like rubbing my tummy this way and patting it this way. Like, absolutely not.
That is scary. I never ever want to. I mean, I would fail every one of those. There's no way I would ever get that right.
No.
And then if you have like a really like heavy duty beefy guy who does not believe that you just like junior mints at 11:30 p.m. driving home from a baseball game, it is the most terrified I've ever been. And like I said,
you in handcuffs?
I was in handcuffs for a little bit. They had to take the handcuffs off when we were doing the test.
Can you post a handcuff emoji?
But that's my most embarrassing story. Like it's because again, I've never been in trouble
I haven't even got to my arrest and police stories yet. So there's a whole, you guys have.
Wow.
That's it.
Wow.
Sam has a lot too. She's got some prison stories.
Hey, I was almost deported once, so you know.
Oh my God, do we need to do another round? That's a good one.
This is prime material for behind the paywall, right?
I'm always, that's why I'm scared to go anywhere, because when I was a kid, because we're British and living in the States, and I think when we were kids, we were going to go to Canada for a trip. This was way before. I mean, by the way, eventually lived in Canada. My 2 kids are Canadian, had 2 boys in Canada. So I love Canada. But when I was a kid, then of course.
What an apologist for Canada. Jeez.
No, I love Canada. Canada, I'm all about Canada. Anyway, so when we were going on vacation, maybe we were seen suspicious or something. I don't know. As a family, we were set aside and questioned for a very, very long time, to the point where we were basically threatened to get put on a plane and go back to England. And it was a pretty traumatizing thing. So ever since then, I've been really just so nervous going to the border. And so then when we eventually later on got married and moved to Canada, for my green card, I have to cross the border every 6 months. I had to basically to keep my green card. And they always pulled us over and my husband would just be like, oh my God, because I just ooze fear. I think it's like they just see me coming to the border. They see my husband and myself and the 2 kids. And I'm like, they just basically are like, you have something to hide. And so I just ooze fear. And because of that, I'm that person. It's like animals, that sense I'm the target. So I
want to draw that prompt, oozing fear.
I ooze fear. I'm the target.
But you answered the question accordingly, like nothing happened.
Nothing ended up happening. And I realize as I'm telling you, this story's really going nowhere. So
no, but that fear is real. I mean,
the fear is real. It is real. And I try to be calm, and I'm like, inside, it's like Eddie Murphy from that movie where he's like, keep it together, keep it together, keep it together. Inside, I'm like, keep it together, keep it together, keep it together. I don't keep it together. I'm like, totally.
All right, I'll
I shouldn't be here. I'm sorry.
Since we're doing top stories, I'll do a light one to end us out on these stories.
For a guy who didn't want any banter at the top of the stream, look at
I'm all about banter. Don't even get me started on banter. So I was at a Atlanta Braves game, and I do not like baseball. Sorry for any baseball aficionados. It's so boring. Anyway, that's my preface to the story. So what is there to do at a baseball game if you don't like the game? You drink, right? So
I liked baseball at the time, so I did not drink in my story. Go ahead.
So I had 1 or 2 drinks. I'm just going to say 1 or 2. And so we're walking out of the game, and I'm with 2 of my friends that I've grown up with, known them forever. And we see a cop, and they have one of those glowing lightsaber, like mini lightsabers, and they're like directing traffic and doing whatever with their little lightsaber. And I was like, I'm going to take that from him. And so, but I was not going to take that from him. It was a totally kidding, right? And so there's probably a 50-foot span where I'm just joking with my friends, and I start running towards the cop with no intention of doing anything.
Sure.
Was this drink like in a boot?
So I'm running, and I've had a few drinks, and in between when I started to run and by the time I got to the cops, I had changed my mind to, I think I'm going to grab it. I'm going to grab it. And I don't know why. It's such a stupid decision to make. No one ever grab anything from a police officer. I'm going to preface the ending of this story with that. So I grab the lightsaber thing, and he's got like an exceptionally strong grip on it. I thought I was going to grab it and I would own it then, and I was going to run, but it didn't work. And so he was holding on to it like a death grip. So I went back and forth with him, and I'm thinking in my head, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And yet I'm going back and forth with him. And eventually he yanks it out of my hand, and then he's immediately in pursuit of me, and I'm running and I'm hiding. And so I'm like darting through everybody. It's when everybody's leaving. So tons of people are coming out. He's on his little radio, and I just hid there for like 15 or 20 minutes, and then I got away. So ultimately not an arrest.
You have a warrant. This was last year, right? This is when you went to Georgia last year? This morning.
Wow.
That's why I was late to the podcast.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, bad decision making. I was young, and do not make that decision. Maybe we want to cut that. Daniel.
This is the last time that Jake's like, yeah, you guys should record with Lee. Like, I'm normally the chaos goblin, but I'm pretty sure that I can give that championship belt back to you. I love it. I love it so much.
Oh my gosh. I think you just have to be in an event where your attention span is kept going. Like,
exactly. Don't get bored.
Wow.
Around me.
Oh my gosh.
All right, guys, let's go ahead and I've got a script here I got to actually read. Okay, so here we go. All right, everybody, thanks for joining us. This is what Jake wrote. All right, everybody, thanks for joining us. 3-Point Perspective is made possible by SVSLearn.com, where becoming a great illustrator starts. Your hosts have been not Will Terry, not Jake Parker, but Sam, Anthony, and Lee show.
You have 200 episodes. I don't understand.
Produced by Daniel 2. Special thanks to team manager Preston Smith. Keeper of the curriculum is Austin Shirtliff. Show Notes Wrangler Lily Howell. Chief Operations Officer is Lisa Fott. Illustrator is Annalise Black. Now, go draw something.